Tonight on Let It Rip.
It's the smallest decline in decades, and so we think it's great news for both the city of Detroit and for the region as a whole.
Detroit continues to lose population, but this time there's room for optimism. Is it a sign the city is finally making a comeback? But first,
you do not need to be a citizen. You just need to be a resident of Detroit, been living here in Detroit and representing Detroit.
Detroit wants to create its own form of ID cards. Among those who would benefit, illegal immigrants. Should the city be spending taxpayer money on those breaking the law? Or is it a way of welcoming everyone and making sure that they all get the help they need?
Time to Let It Rip on the panel right now. She's the first Latino city council member in the history of Detroit. Raquel Castaneda-Lopez learned the values of honesty, hard work, and justice from her mother and her migrant father, and now seeks to improve the quality of life for families all over the city. Next to her, a man who started his broadcast career some 40 years ago as a long-haired rock and roller. He still plays the hits on WLLZ, but now that his hair is short and gray, he's become a conservative with a national following online. Jimmy J.J. Johnson is back, and so is a familiar face. She was once an award-winning reporter for Fox 2 News until Detroit made her an offer she couldn't refuse. She's now chief of staff for Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan. Some people call her the most powerful woman in City Hall. And also with us, some call Pharaoh X, the most dangerous man on radio. He's a passionate conservative known for challenging Democrats and Republicans. You can hear him weekdays on 1600 AM Wham Radio. And of course, you can find anchor reporter Charlie Langton here on Fox 2 24/7. The man never sleeps, the hardest working man in broadcasting. Councilwoman Raquel Castaneda-Lopez. This was passed unanimously by the City Council, but it offers IDs to a number of people and a number of classifications. What exactly are you trying to do?
Sure, the whole intent of the ordinance was to remove barriers for many of the communities in the city of Detroit that really can't access IDs. So, for example, the homeless community struggles to get all of the documentation needed to get a driver's license or to get a state ID. The same thing with senior citizens. My grandmother, for example, is 86 years old, has Alzheimer's, frequently loses her identification, and so to find all the paperwork and to go and get a new ID is a laborious process. So from youth to senior citizens to the homeless community to returning citizens to migrants, really to all Detroiters as a whole, it's something that can help increase access to services and to information. And really, as a local government, it's what we should be doing, is to remove barriers that prevent residents from being able to participate in our communities and being able to access valuable services.
But Jimmy, everybody on this panel has some form of ID right now. Sure. Why shouldn't the people that the councilwoman is speaking of have IDs as well?
First of all, that's awfully sugar-coated of it. Homeless people can get IDs, state IDs, just as easy as anybody else. The issue here is illegal immigration. Criminal aliens entering the country with no identification. This gives them some legitimacy. And for my money, this is exactly the wrong thing we should be doing. We should be discouraging illegal immigration and encouraging folks not to come here illegally. And this sends the wrong message. Detroit is a sanctuary city. Detroit, Ann Arbor, Battle Creek are Michigan's sanctuary cities. And if that's what we want, that's what we want. Personally, that's not what I want. I don't want Detroit to be a sanctuary city. I want to, this subverts the immigration laws of the United States, and I think that we should be upholding the laws of the United States as far as immigration goes.
Well, can I ask a quick question? Have you read the ordinance? I'm just curious.
I have.
I'm assuming not.
Okay. Because it doesn't
from what you're saying, and one, Detroit is not a sanctuary city.
Detroit is a sanctuary city.
One, we have to understand facts before you take on this issue. This is critical. When you think about people who, for one, somebody who's getting out of prison, oftentimes they don't have an ID when they get out. And you're the same people who say, I want you to get a job, I want you to get engaged. You need to be able to prove who you are to access the most basic services. And the mere fact that you've reduced this to whatever political issue you've got,
what are you going to say when I say get an ID to vote? What are you going to say when I say get an ID to vote? That's when it all falls apart. You don't want, I don't know about you personally, but the Democrat Party wants nobody to be ID'd to vote because it'll make voting harder. It'll disenfranchise people of color. That's BS. This whole ID thing is 100% BS, and it is around illegal aliens. And as Jim just said, it's a question of law and order, which no longer seems to apply in this country. If I come to your house tonight after the show, just walk in the door, open the refrigerator, start eating your food, pet your dog, dog. I turn on the TV, the channel I want, not the one you want. That's essentially what's going on our border. They come into our house of love, take our stuff, and we can't stop them, and they're breaking the law. They're not illegal immigrants.
I thought this was for library cards and to try to get some basic services like see their kids in school. Where are we going?
Or payment plans, pay your water bill or access basic city services you're already using.
I don't think by getting a Detroit ID card that there's going to be a flood of illegal immigrants into the city. I don't think so.
But you have to ask this question, though. In a city that is already suffering from financial problems, how much is this going to cost to administer? I know it will cost individuals roughly $25, but what about the taxpayers in Detroit? How much will they have to pay to keep this program going?
Well, for one, we've already identified the funds to be able to operate the program, and it is far less than I have heard you say, you know.
They're federal funds, by the way. That money comes from the feds and the final analysis.
Not true. We as a city have made a priority that we believe that this is something that is important. We think that it'll cost us less than maybe $200,000 to potentially run this for 2 years.
How many police officers could we hire for $200,000?
And how many people in our community deserve access to opportunities
in this city instead of providing sanctuary for illegal aliens?
The beautiful thing is this is not your city. So Detroit,
what do you mean
don't live in
our city?
I don't know.
You don't live in our city, so you don't have to apply for an ID.
Whoa, it's our city because we're in Michigan.
I think that it's something that actually matters to so many people.
We're in Michigan, and Detroit is sucking almost a black hole, a vacuum of sucking money out of Lansing and the federal government. It doesn't matter what pot it's in. Oh, Detroit said it's this. It's coming from
I think if we go back to the issue in terms of the card, again, it's about providing access, and it's about making sure that all Detroiters are recognized, and that's a basic right in terms of, I think, human dignity. These are people, whether you're homeless, whether it's myself,
get a job.
And the funding, and these cards will help provide access to for people to get a job. And the funding that has been identified so far is really outside funding, so it is not going to be an additional drain on the city's budget. And so I think if people actually read the ordinance, if you're a City of Detroit resident and interested in applying, then you have that as another option.
What is outside funding?
It's not required. It doesn't replace the state ID. It doesn't replace the driver's license.
What is outside funding?
We are currently talking to foundations and corporations to help subsidize the
and we have multiple commitments.
That is being finalized in the next couple months. So I've written in the ordinances that the program will roll out in the fall specifically so that we can address some of these issues.
But then why would you not want people to have IDs, even if they're illegally here? Don't you want somebody, if somebody happens to do something to you, don't you want to know who he is? If someone happens to do something good for you, don't you want to know who she is? What's the problem with giving IDs to illegal immigrants, the homeless, or to people who are in trouble? How are you harmed by what they're trying to do?
Services are a slippery slope. Services, this ordinance gives them identification. The next move is going to be allowing them to vote in city elections.
But at least you know who they are now. Isn't it better to know who they are?
Shouldn't we finding out that they are actually here illegally and should be deported?
But you can't.
Isn't that more to the point?
You cannot use a municipal ID to vote. You cannot. The state legislature determines exactly what you can use, and then also you can potentially sign an affidavit that says that you don't have an ID to vote. So municipal ID and voting are two separate issues. I think right now you're just trying to basically muddy the water so that you can make it seem like this ID is less valuable. Bottom line, this is about making sure that we are giving people access to opportunities in our city, and there are many, many people.
And also allow people to put money into banks as well.
And put money into banks.
I would think that we would want as much money in our banks as we possibly could. All sources, I would think.
That's the point of all of this, is to have access to the banks to make it easier and less expensive to ship the money back to their families in Mexico.
$20 billion a year.
Because it's expensive to do it now. It's cheaper to do it through the banks. That's why they want the bank access. So that's the point of it.
So then your solution to this problem is simply deportation? You agree with Donald Trump? Let's deport 11 million people here?
You've got to back up. You guys are way ahead of the curve here. Here's the deal. We shouldn't be giving people IDs and services. We should make it impossible for them to go to school, for them to get jobs. If they get medical help, yes, we'll patch people up. We're a magnanimous and benevolent society. But once we do, if they're illegal, you're out.
And I'm assuming you feel the same way about homeless people? You feel the same way about returning citizens?
Homeless has nothing to do with an American citizen.
It absolutely does.
No homeless
Well, homeless is included in the law.
Absolutely. Because oftentimes, if you have if many people have difficulty getting the necessary documents for getting a Secretary of State ID. So what we have is it's a wider range of documents documents, all verified.
And they all have to be verified. It's not like you can just walk in the
right.
They
You have that's the problem with this. You have no idea who these people are who are requesting these cards.
And they blurred the lines on purpose.
You have to present more documents.
What kind of documents?
So one could be, let's say if you're someone who's a returning citizen.
You just said homeless people don't have documents. What kind of documents can they?
What? You can show all different kinds of things that prove your identity. They all are verified. If you are someone who tries to use fraudulent documents, if you use fraudulent documents, you've committed a crime.
If you committed a crime by entering this country illegally, you've already committed a crime.
When you lumped homeless with illegal aliens, that was a tactic. You blurred the lines on purpose.
Okay,
it's two separate
one at a time. Raquel, and then
I think it's obvious that our partners here have not read the ordinance because it clearly lists out the acceptable documents and the point system that this creates that people can pull together to secure an ID.
You could create
right now you can submit fraudulent documents. You could have submitted fraudulent documents.
I could have 3 of these cards if I wanted to under 3 different names. And you have no idea who I am.
Wait a minute, but that's criminal. That's true now. All right, Charlie?
I just don't know. If I'm a criminal alien, I don't know that I'm going to really go to the government to get my Detroit ID card anyway. I mean, seriously. Well, I don't think you're going to have a bunch of criminals. Gee, I'm a criminal. I'm here illegal, but I can get a card.
Are you kidding? You're going to be able to get 5 or 6 of them and apply for social services.
No, these are for people that need the services that are here. This is what it's for.
And one point that we haven't yet touched about is essentially that we want all Detroiters to apply for these cards. Absolutely. I have a passport, I have a driver's license, but we want to attach additional benefits to it. For example, the City of New York gave free admissions to their museums for the first year. We would love to be able to offer the same type of thing in the City of Detroit. Potentially discounts with pharmacies, right? Another great perk that all Detroiters could benefit from. So really it's about Detroit being a welcoming city, making sure that we're inclusive and everyone has equal access to be recognized in our city as a whole. Yeah. And so illegal, homeless, returning vets that stand on the side of the road begging for money, that they should be able to access services.
This is all a whitewash, folks. This is all a whitewash. And I would encourage... The only way we can stop this is our state legislators to pass legislation at a state level that blocks this. Yes. That's the next move we have to take.
Well, so far that has not happened. But anyway, we thank you all. We thank you all for being here. We thank you for your courage to at least propose it and get it passed.
Thank you so much.
We don't know where it's going to lead or what will happen. Of course, we'll have this discussion again. We know we will. We appreciate your comments and your insights. All right, coming up, is the glass half full or half empty when it comes to Detroit's latest census numbers? That debate is next. Stay with us. You know, there's one set of numbers, but apparently it's a tale of 2 cities when it comes to what those numbers really mean. Welcome back to Let It Rip, and also welcome back to the woman who's been a force for change since the day she was born in Detroit. Alena Harada does it all. She's a member of the ACLU, the Michigan Coalition for Human Rights, and the Detroit School Board. You can hear her talk show Sunday mornings at 6 a.m. on 910 a.m. the Superstation. We thank you for being here. Of course, you all know JJ, Alexis, Theron, and Charlie. Well, here we have, a quote Charles Dickens, a tale of 2 cities. It was the best of times, the worst of times. You've seen the numbers. Detroit is still losing people, but not as much as before. What do you think?
Well, I think that there's some pretty major issues that do drive people out of the city. One of them is mortgage foreclosures. Another one is the closing of schools. And I think driver's insurance really causes a lot of people to have to leave Detroit.
JJ, you've been in this market, what, 41 years?
I grew up here. I was born in the city, and I've lived here all my life.
So when you look at the city now, when you look at the current census numbers, are you optimistic?
Yes, and I'll tell you why. I've lived here all my life. I've seen the city, one of the most remarkable cities in the world. I've seen its decline, and now I'm seeing it like a phoenix rise from the ashes. I go downtown, and I have great joy in my heart to see the good that's coming of the city. And I take my daughter and my son there. My daughter would love to move back down into the city of Detroit, live there, and have a career in the city of Detroit. She'd love to have a loft or an apartment, a townhouse down there. She would love it. It's not quite there yet, but we're getting close, and it's better. And I, frankly, 10 years ago, didn't think I'd see it in my lifetime. I'm thankful that I've lived long enough to see the beginning of it.
JJ, I think you and Alexis agree.
Wow. I was thinking that. But, you know, I think the key thing that really is the story that these numbers really tell is that Detroit is experiencing the lowest decline since 1950. I mean, that is huge. And what that's really telling you is that people are choosing to stay. That there are people who, and there's a combination of things happening. And I think when you look at what the mayor has really been focusing on, when you look at foreclosure, coming up with legislation to help people get into payment plans and stay in their homes. When you look at programs like Grow Detroit Young Talents to make sure that our kids have jobs over the summer and have an opportunity to make money. When you look at what he's doing, spending every single day in Lansing fighting to really get some legislation that is going to help our schools, he's really focused on making sure that we're improving the quality of life in our neighborhood so that people want to be in Detroit, because what we've seen is that people have been fleeing in droves. The city has been bleeding in terms of the population, and that has stopped.
But I heard someone say that you have still two Detroits. You have people who indeed want to stay, but you have people who can't afford to leave. And that's what you have right now.
I'm going to be the devil's advocate here. I grew up in and around Detroit as well. I was born here. I love this city. I take a lot of pride in being from Detroit. A lot of people say they're from Detroit. They're from the suburbs. I'm from Detroit. I went through the best of times. I was here through the late 50s, 60s when it was just gold. It was a cultural jewel. Broke my heart to see Detroit go right into the crapper around, and there's no other way to look at it. Huge union largesse salaries, city employees getting an insane amount of money, guaranteed pensions, etched in stone. And
was it the fact that the auto industry?
I was getting to that.
Thank you.
I was getting to that. That guy getting $75 an hour for screwing in lug nuts. I mean, I worked in all these machine shops around here.
Was it so much of that? It's the fact that the auto industry itself declined. There was a point in our history. There was a point in our history when we made 75% of all the cars in the world. We no longer do that. Competition forced adjustments, and those adjustments ultimately hurt Detroit, hurt Flint, hurt the entire state of Michigan. And that's a part of the problem. It's perhaps bigger than just a matter of Republican, a Democrat, conservative, liberal. It's bigger than that.
It was the housing market crash that really took this thing into the ground.
And now we have the schools in trouble. You're on the Detroit Public School Board, elected but powerless right now. When you look at the school system, where do you see that as a factor in the rebirth of this city?
Well, as long as it's separate and unequal from the rest of the state, we cannot recover. As long as Detroit doesn't have the same right to govern its school board as the white districts do across the state. Some of them are in worse financial shape than we are, and they have not been taken over under Public Act 436. But Detroit has absolutely no authority over our own finances. We can't open and close schools. We can't decide on curriculum. We can't do anything, and we haven't since 2009.
We haven't been able to spend. Extortion of public officials of the school system's money has a little something to do with that.
But schools and crime, we've got to take care of that. Detroit is coming back. It is great down there. I've been down there a lot, and it's fantastic. I love to live down there.
It is.
And I think it's really good.
You know what?
Southwest Detroit, that's a booming area.
I think that we are on the right track. I think there is a lot of work that has to be done. No one will argue that. But what we can say is that people are noticing that work is being done. So they're being given hope to say, okay, maybe it makes sense for me to stay in this house where my property values are now going up. I'm feeling a little better in my neighborhood. I've got a better relationship with my district managers, with my neighborhood police officer. I'm starting to see some of the change that I've wanted to see. I think that's inspiring people to hold on. We still have a ways to go. Nobody here is under any illusion that it's time for some victory dance, but it's really time for us to really double down on our efforts. And the mayor and the chief have been working very closely, looking at crime-fighting strategies. Look, when you look at Project Greenlight,
there's
when you
an
look at what's happening.
800-pound gorilla in the room. Look out, here
What's
it comes.
the gorilla?
The little kids can't read past a third grade level when they get through high school. You got kids that are being literally dumped into college that have no business being in college and need all kinds of remedial work.
Well, and if we're honest about it, a lot lot of our kids don't make it to college.
And you also have kids going to Harvard and Yale and Princeton.
Absolutely.
So you have people.
I'm not saying they're all. I'm saying the overall gestalt, if you will, is kids can't come out of high school at a third grade level. It isn't going to work.
So what that takes then is ultimately people with money like you ultimately moving back into the city, contributing your tax dollars to the rebirth.
You can't keep throwing money at it. It's homeschooling, it's charter schools, it's everything where they break out of the system.
And it is the involvement of people like you in the lives of the children.
Or it's the empowerment.
Of the parents.
Yeah. Or it's the empowerment of the people who are living.
And you are
wrong. I think
you've done a good job with your children.
Solution within the city. People who live in the city have always known what needs to be done. You know, I spent years out on the streets talking to people about what they wanted to see in their neighborhoods. They know what needs to happen. The question is it happening or not? And I think that right now people are saying, all right, I'm seeing it happening.
Will we have to shrink the city to get that done? What we have seen is 900 housing permits, building permits in the city, more than any other city in the state of Michigan. Right. We've seen that increase, but we've seen it in Corktown. We've seen it in Southwest Detroit. We've seen it in pockets, but we haven't seen it in every neighborhood. So is the solution then getting the people in the neighborhoods to go closer to where the economic activity is boiling?
It's not
is that a possibility?
Sure, that is a good way. Absolutely, if you can get that. Absolutely.
I think that the key to it is really making sure that we're really focused on all our neighborhoods and really helping people create the reality that they want to see in their community. And I think every neighborhood will be different. Every neighborhood is different, but at the same time, I think this whole city has a future together. But I think and that's going to be the key to how we move forward.
If people are forced out of their places where they live because the school is closed, and there is a master plan that makes blue spaces and green spaces where currently there are black spaces, then there is not going to be any kind of rebirth for everybody that's in the city. It's going to be for a few people, and it's going to be for the rich. It's going to be a playground downtown that everybody loves to go to. There's jobs that don't pay enough money to live on. There are jobs that are coming, but who's getting those jobs?
And Elena, at the end of the day, what we have to do is make sure, one, that we're bringing jobs into our neighborhoods, that we're making sure that people have the training for the jobs that are coming, and we make sure that our school system is stabilized so you don't have the chaos of schools opening and closing every other year.
That's a good message. How do you do it?
And we as a city need to stabilize it, so we need to work together and get our city stable.
We can't solve it tonight, but we are at least getting started. As Nancy Caffer wrote in her article today, Detroit's story is complicated, but it's not over. This is just the beginning. All right, thank you.
In the shadows of Mexico or Pakistan or wherever they get.
Okay.
All right. All right.
All right. We are still talking about census numbers. Everybody's excited here on the panel. We're still talking about the numbers in Detroit. The best of times, the worst of times, what are they?
Yeah, well, no doubt about it. Detroit's going to get better. But listen, here's all these IDs. These IDs are really something. People have a lot of opinions about it. I mean, some people say it's good in bringing people to the city of Detroit, get the benefits they have. Others say it's an avenue for illegals to come to Detroit. Here's what some people said. In Detroit, they just gave away ID cards, okay? They gave them to people who are undocumented immigrants. Do you see any problem with that?
Potentially.
Somebody needs to get a handle on them, who they are, where they are, what they're doing.
That's an undocumented ID card they're giving away. Like the state is giving them away?
The city.
The city?
It brings diversity to the city, and Detroit is very well known for it.
It's important to value, people and, human life, especially with the refugees and, undocumented people who are coming into this country.
They say that people that need those cards, because they can go to the library, they can go into the schools, they can use them for other things, for identification. But some people fear, well, do you have any fears?
I just don't think it's necessary.
It's just getting a little out of control.
50 years down the road, when they want to know where their family started, now they have at least something to go with. Oh, well, we were in Detroit at one point.
I think it's great if we could find some spectrum and at least some balance where we could figure out how to legally bring people over.
You think the city of Detroit's encouraging people to be illegal?
Maybe somewhat, a little.
If they want to become part of our country, then there's ways to go about it.
It brings diversity to the city, and Detroit is very well known for it.
It's hard to correctly say what's right.
Well, Detroit's population is declining only slightly, but the immigrant population is growing, Alexis. More people are coming here from overseas.
Absolutely, and I think that when you look at municipal IDs, I think that this is really about making sure that people aren't forced to live in the shadows, that we make sure that everyone in Detroit has access to opportunities that everyone else has. It's critical that as we move forward as a city, that everyone's included in our resurgence, and that's why this is so important.
I would add to that, I would agree with all of that, with the exception of people who are here illegally.
Bottom line.
I would add, and I would make a call out to every single person in Detroit to get a municipal ID. Every single Detroiter should have one.
They don't. If you come here, you got to be legal, and you got to bring something to the party. You don't just come in need of benefits and not speak the language and take the country.
Charlie?
I think we're going way ahead. They're too far astray on these cards. They're for benefits for the people of the city of Detroit. They're not for illegal activity. No, good cards. Let them go get them.
I think we're going to have a very happy ending eventually to this wonderful story that we call Detroit. All right, panel, thank you, and thank you for watching this edition of Let It Rip.
The Let It Rip discussion continues online. Sound off on Facebook, Twitter, or fox2detroit.com.